Hope you're all doing well. My name is Miyun Sele, and I lead the partnerships vertical at Climate Asia. I'll be moderating today's Conversation of Change series with our guest speaker, Mr. Suvranil Majumdar, who is the Global Director of Climate and Environment at the Global Development Incubator. To give you a brief about his background, Mr. Suvranil is a management and global public policy professional with more than 19 years of leadership experience in the private sector and international development organizations. He has led the strategic engagements with governments, the private sector, startups, and investors with a focus on climate smart solutions, unlocking $100 million worth of financing across India, Southeast Asia, Africa, USA, and Europe. He has earned his bachelor's degree in engineering and master's in public policy from Harvard Kennedy School. He is a founding member of Harvard Climate Entrepreneurship Circle, engaged with startups on product development, go-to-market strategy, and fundraising. Lastly, he is also the co-lead of TIE's IoT Forum's sustainability track, engaging with multiple startups and other key stakeholders in the climate ecosystem. Thank you so much, Suvranil, for joining us today. It is a pleasure to have you as part of our conversation series.
Thank you. Thanks, Mia. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you. Great. So I would like to kickstart this session with your first question about your role at the Global Development Incubator. So what does a typical day as the Global Director of Climate and Environment at GDI look like? And also, could you share a little bit about the work done at GDI?
Sure. So I'm currently the Director for Climate and Environment at GDI. GDI stands for Global Development Incubator, and it's an incubator for scaling transformational ventures. So we collaborate with partners, including foundations, corporations, governments, nonprofits, to build social impact entities and prepare them for long-term systems change. I'm a bit new to GDI, just joined 3 months back, but it has been a great experience. My focus at GDI will be on building or supporting climate-focused multi-stakeholder ventures across mitigation, adaptation, and carbon removal that also addresses challenges around access and equity. One of the initiatives that we have started is the Resilient Water Accelerator along with WaterAid UK. And the idea is to build locally led multi-stakeholder platforms to develop climate-resilient water initiatives as well as unlock large-scale commercial financing. So we are starting the work in Bangladesh and Africa with plans to expand in Asia. Hence, a lot of our time is now being spent to identify the country needs, building the team, as well as for fundraising. I'm also speaking with other relevant initiatives in India on possible collaboration in a climate adaptation as well as on the resilience side.
Great. You've had an interesting career journey so far. So you have had a background in engineering, and then you moved to become a management and global public policy professional with over 19 years of experience. So how would you describe your career journey into this space, and what were your key learnings?
So I'm not sure if it is a very unique journey, but I've kind of thoroughly enjoyed this opportunity of working with different kinds of organizations. So as you mentioned, I started in the private sector in the IT space, working with financial clients, then joined the World Bank Group, focusing on international development, working with governments, private sector, and think tanks to develop climate smart infrastructure projects. And now with GDI to focus on scaling impactful social and environmental ventures. The key driver for me has been to get the exposure of working with different kind of organizations to build partnerships that is kind of needed to drive system level kind of changes. So if I can summarize the key learnings, I would say that I think one should think carefully and leverage the skills that one has and be able to leverage those skills from one organization to another. So very often we think in quite silos that yes, I come from a technical background, so I cannot move to the public policy field, or I'm from the public policy, so I cannot work on a project that's more on financing. So one should think hard and see as to how the skills could be used across kind of projects. This is because comes to my second point is the world will create opportunities for those who can engage with different kind of stakeholders and bring some expertise and be able to kind of work together to address the global problems. So the essence is around like multi-stakeholder partnerships that is very much required when we talk about resolving issues, say climate or kind of health as an example. But it's very important to understand the nuances. So having that, I would not say the thorough experience, but having that exposure to work across organizations is quite important. Uh, Next would be that understanding the local context could be quite important as one moves in the career. So one can work across geographies, but then also it's important to understand that the socio-economic, the political context varies from market to market and even from sector to sector. For example, I worked a lot in the electric mobility space across the World Bank group. And when we're focusing on deploying solutions in kind of South Asia, including India, the focus was on the electric two-wheelers, three-wheelers, rather than four-wheelers, which is more prevalent in the North American or in the European markets. So it's very important to understand the context and then how to develop solutions that addresses the customer needs in that kind of geographies. And the last learning I would say is whenever you think about working on a product or a kind of a service, do not restrict yourself to developing outputs that only solve the problem for a small segment of population. Of course, you can think so. You can like start small, but always think about how do you really kind of scale the business. And I think that experience of working with different kind of stakeholders, understanding the complexities, and then developing and implementing holistic solutions really drive kind of system level changes. So these are the key learnings that I can say that I've gained from this experience of working with different stakeholders.
Right. Thank you. That was also interesting. Thank you. I just wanted to pick a little bit on the climate aspect. So when it comes to your expertise area of work, especially leading the climate and environmental initiatives, like you mentioned, climate mitigation, adaptation, and nature-based solutions, what according to you that you mentioned are the essential skill sets that are required for a professional or individual to be working in these areas?
See, given the size and nature of the problem that we have around climate change, there is a need for different and varied kind of skills, from technology to policy to business to legal, environmental, social analysis. So that's kind of huge field where one can operate. If you talk about the hard skills, which is usually about the engineering, about the technical side, about building new products and solutions that we are already seeing in the market. The aspect that we're seeing around climate change is still the focus has been more on the mitigation side, that how do you really reduce the carbon emissions. But I'm also seeing now a kind of pockets of solutions evolving in the other parts, which is around like climate adaptation, which is very important, especially in this part of the world, that the skills to how do you estimate the climate risk and develop solutions according to that needs. So I would say that the technical skills is of course quite important. The other part is you may not be an expert, but understanding the different financing options to support climate initiatives is very important. So you may have read from various reports like post-COP, as well as other kind of analysis that there are different kinds of capital. It could be venture the funds, it could be the public kind of financing, the blended financing options to kind of de-risk the climate ventures. So having a very broad level understanding about the finance space is quite important. The third is beyond the technology side. I think whoever has an interest is to look also into the policy regulatory side, and that's not only in terms of monitoring the solution, but also is to how do you really create the market to kind of scale the initiatives. So that would be on the enabling environment side, which is also quite important. And lastly would be around the business operating side, that how do you have the right strategy, how do you adopt the right business model to really scale those kind of solutions. And lastly, again, maybe a soft skill, which is quite important, and like that links to my earlier point, was the ability to engage with different stakeholders, understand the various strengths as well as weakness of each party, and then kind of develop and implement holistic solutions is very much needed if you're talking about addressing large-scale problems such as climate change.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. For your next question, you are also working as a co-lead of TIE's IoT group, which involves engagement with startups working in technology. So what, according to you, is a young entrepreneur's perspective on climate crisis, and do they perceive it as a chance for innovation and profitability?
Yes, Mayank, I think based on the experience that I had with TIE as well as engaging with different climate entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, I see kind of a strong interest from kind of young entrepreneurs to really kind of contribute to this space. It's currently, I would say, still more kind of existing in the main cities, such as maybe in Bangalore or NCR in the Mumbai region. But we are also seeing kind of sizable interest from the tier 2, tier 3 cities, which is very important as we think about the climate action across India. I think these entrepreneurs are quite aware of the large problem and its implications. And we generally say that it's for our grandchildren that we need to address climate change, but we all realize that the future is not that far, that we talk about water crisis that can happen in the next like year for 10 to 15 years. Having said that, I think the entrepreneurs still have a slight interest to focus on the mitigation side. And again, if I talk about mitigation more on say energy, renewable energy, or in energy efficiency, or say the electric mobility space. But I'm hoping that we would be seeing more solutions in the other sectors, be it in the agriculture domain or be it in the industrial side as well. Then again, we need more solutions in the adaptation resilience space, given 1.5-degree increase is a reality in this part of the world. So how do you kind of identify kind of products as well as develop solutions to address this increase in temperature, be it around sustainable cooling or be it around other kind of risk measurement measures will be quite kind of important. Uh, the, the key part which will differentiate the 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 successful ventures vis-a-vis the non-successful ones would be the starters who are able to kind of figure out the business model to convert these very interesting ideas, ventures into sustainable business. It may not be profitable from day zero, but at least having that kind of line of sight is important. So if I have to say that yes, climate action is very important. They're all trying to develop solutions that can reduce carbon emissions and to have a much more kind of resilient kind of society. But one also needs to kind of think about the right kind of business operating model, because the key aspect is that one cannot just ask the customer to pay more or to consume less just because it is a kind of green product. So I think these aspects are to be considered for the startup entrepreneurs, and to kind of see as to how they can scale their solutions not only in the main cities but across the tier 2, tier 3, even the rural parts of India.
Great, thank you. You have experience in both engineering and several management disciplines, such as strategy development and program management, like you mentioned. So how would you describe the significance of technology and management in averting a climate calamity?
I think technology will play a very critical role in this I think global endeavor to address climate change, right? That of course one is on the real engineering or on the technical hardware solutions, be it on the energy, on the mobility, or in the industrial side to really reduce kind of emissions. Software will have an equally important role if you're thinking about scaling these operations at a kind of at a faster kind of trajectory. I think software will also help in terms of ensuring access and equity, because the point is around not only developing a very high technology, a superior product, which is not accessible to the remote parts of the country. So I think the technology which solves the problem, but which is also equitable, will be very kind of important. And hence, I think having the right strategy in place to identify the markets develop your product catering to the market, and then think about scaling that will be quite important. But yes, I think technology will play a very kind of critical role. Again, the point is, I am hoping that technology will be used beyond just the traditional sectors of energy and mobility, but much more also in the other parts, especially around agriculture or in the industry or in the building space, which equally can contribute to large part of the emissions. And also technology used around climate adaptation and resilience will be the need of the hour in India as well as in other parts of Africa.
Yeah, thank you. So over the years, you have worked with several developing nations, including those in Africa, Latin America, and Bangladesh. Also, you mentioned that you're working with currently. And it is commonly accepted that vulnerable nations will be more affected by climate change. So what, in your opinion, will be the primary issue these nations will confront as a result of the changing climate?
So when we travel to these countries, be it in Africa, Latin America, and I worked in this part of the world, in that part of the world a lot, given my work at the IFC World Bank, working both on the water resource management side as well as on electric mobility. And I see quite a kind of vibrant ecosystem, right? That they are one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The population has kind of huge aspirations and ambitions to access better products and services. So one is on the socio-economic growth side, but the equally challenging aspect is around climate. And we have read from different reports that those part of the world, like in Africa or in like South Asia, including India, will face the maximum challenges, be in terms of droughts or be in terms of floods. So the essence will be, how do you really balance the growth versus that sustainable kind of development? Now we have seen different literature as well as thought articles as to the developed nations advising these countries to reduce emissions, to kind of overnight kind of close the coal plants. But for me, very practical kind of speaking, that's not a very kind of right way to look at things, because you cannot kind of penalize somebody who had no kind of who in fact did not do anything for the last like 50 to kind of 70 years. So I think the need for balance is very important. And the good part is that it's not only the north-south that is happening in terms of somebody developing a climate solution in Silicon Valley, trying to replicate that in Africa or in India, but we are seeing the local startup ecosystem as well as the venture ecosystem working quite closely together to develop products and solutions that can address to their kind of markets. And also we are seeing that in Africa, in the electric mobility space, a lot of interesting in the 2-3-wheelers as well in the shared mobility, a lot of fleet kind of space working on to reduce the decarbonization of the transport sector. Yes, the venture ecosystem is still, I would say, nascent, not much in India, of course, but in that part of the world. But we are seeing a growing number of also local ventures in partnership, say, with other global entities to kind of support this entity, to support the climate ecosystem. But I think overall, there is a recognition that economic growth would happen, but it may not happen at the cost of this kind of emitting more carbon. And I guess one can leapfrog from the examples of what's happening in the north and trying to kind of identify climate resilient initiatives that can kind of balance that both. So I see that kind of happening quite a bit. But I guess I think the next decade belongs to the emerging markets, be it in India, Southeast Asia, as well as Africa.
Yeah, so as the founder and advisor of Climate Entrepreneur Circle, which was very interesting to me, it's a program for high potential ventures working to address climate change. So you must have come across several innovative ideas to minimize the changing climate. So does it make you hopeful about the future of climate? And can you share your thoughts on how Climate Asia or anyone in this space can help other nonprofits in the ecosystem to find that intersection of their work with climate?
Yes, so the Climate Circle is a very interesting incubator that had started by the Harvard Innovation Labs by a couple of alums, including myself. And there we are in the second year operations. In the first year, we are supported on 16 startups, and in the second year, almost around 26 startups working across sectors, be it in clean energy, mobility, circular economy, carbon offsets, wastewater reuse, etc. So we provide different kinds of support in both in terms of product development, go-to-market strategy, as well as kind of fundraising. And we are seeing very interesting kind of development that some have really now moved beyond just the idea stage to doing some kind of pilots. And then with additional funds, they're also kind of quite hopeful to kind of scale the solution. So I think this type of uh, ventures are quite important, and that's where maybe still a missing link in the India emerging market ecosystem, that this university-led or maybe government or maybe non-profit entities trying to build a cohort of these startups and provide this type of support, financial but also operational support to kind of help kind of scale these entities. So I think this is something that is very important. For Climate Asia, I would say I'm quite impressed with the work that you guys are doing in kind of not only building the awareness, but also kind of thinking about uh, mobilizing skills that would be needed in the climate space. And there again, we don't talk much, but in order to achieve our goals of net zero to around climate mitigation, adaptation, there is a kind of huge skills gap. So how do you one create the green jobs, but also have developed the skill set to kind of do these jobs quite effectively? So I think in that regard, climate action is doing quite a bit interesting work in terms of mobilizing and galvanizing the interest from different stakeholders and kind of helping entrepreneurs as well as others develop the right kind of skills to be effective in this climate action journey.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question is for young professionals like us aspiring to make it in the sector. So if you could tell us how you manage your work-life balance, and if you have a mantra in life, what is it?
Uh, I think there is no kind of a kind of a single kind of answer. I'd say climate is such a very important topic for the current generation as well as for the future. So I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I kind of think about her kind of future aspiration is what the world that we are kind of living for her. But even as I mentioned, like taking a step back, I think the future is not that kind of not that kind of too distant. Like I have worked a lot in the water space earlier, and I can tell you that water scarcity is real, and that is often not talked much. We often talk about energy, electric vehicles, but the basic needs of water, etc., which are being facing the most challenges due to climate change. So for me, the essence would be to develop maybe one kind of skill set, be it on the technology side, be on the financing side, be on the policy regulatory side. But it's also very important, as I mentioned, to think about how do you think of like develop kind of partnerships and kind of structure multi-stakeholder initiatives that can kind of drive kind of climate action, because no single party can solve this problem alone. And this has been a main challenge that we will think about just developing the technology to kind of at a lab without thinking of piloting that and then kind of scaling that. You need the role of government to create the enabling environment. You need the financiers who need to fund these initiatives, and there is like a kind of huge kind of set of work is ongoing around green finance, around how do you get around sustainable finance. But I think the skill set that will be valued is the person who has the not only the expertise but the humility to work with different stakeholders and to develop kind of very kind of holistic solutions. I must also add that given sometimes it's thought about pretty kind of long-term problem, it's also very important to think about creating or building the momentum. One can easily get lost in terms of thinking about a 10-year solution, but it's very important to think about what are the milestones that one can achieve in the next like 1 year, 3 years, kind of 5 years. So this for me is kind of the essence in terms of thinking about partnerships, thinking of the local context, and then thinking about driving systems change. Not only thinking from a project program perspective, but thinking about driving a holistic change. And that has been, say, my key driver for moving from the private sector to the international development to now this role where I hopefully can engage with different stakeholders to kind of address this kind of problem. I don't think I'm an expert on the work-life balance thing, to be very honest. But like my work as well as my 7-year-old daughter kind of keeps me busy, and there's a lot of overlaps between the work and the thing. But I guess the advice that I kind of give to young professionals is maybe to spend a little bit of time every day to kind of reflect on the various activities she or he is doing on the day. We tend to focus so much on our inputs, on our daily calls, on our on our emails, on our kind of activities, that a little bit of reflection, even maybe in like 15 to 30 minutes, can be good, kind of good booster, not only for like de-stressing, I would say, but also kind of thinking about what with how you could have done things better and how can I improve on the work. So this would be my advice. And the book I'm kind of reading again is the autobiography of Imran, and I again kind of found it really fascinating as to how she was able to use her skill set to work across organizations and able to do that kind of successfully and gain from that experience. So that for me was fascinating to know about her journey from India to US to work at these global entities, as well as to produce to also kind of think about impact, which is so important, even if you work in the private sector or any other organizations.
Right. Thank you. I think we have come at the end of the conversation, and thank you so much, Suvranil, for this very engaging and insightful conversation. Thank you for sharing about your work, your experience, and about thoughts about climate. It has really been a pleasure to host you for this session, and we hope to keep in touch and wishing you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me.